Okay.
It's good to welcome Stephen Bodian to this podcast. He is a spiritual teacher and a counselor. I got to know him from listening to Sam Harris's Waking Up app. He has a program there, a course, and an interview with the Waking Up app's creator, Sam Harris. Stephen, how are you?
I'm good. How about you,
Yeah.
Chuang?
I'm quite well, and yeah, it's Chung.
Chung. Okay. How are you, Chung?
So we are focusing this hour on Stevens' spiritual teacher, mentor, John Klein, as well as
Okay.
the concept of non-dualism. So I'd like to first begin by asking you, how did you become a student of Klein?
Well, I was a Zen monk for 10 years, and then I left that to study psychology because I felt Western psychology because I felt that that would be necessary to teach Western students as a Buddhist teacher. And then over the course of several years, I studied different the Buddhist traditions besides Zen, a little bit of Tibetan Buddhism, a little bit of Vipassana. And then I happened upon Jean Klein through a friend who introduced me to him. And I went to his one of his weekend workshops, and then I went to a retreat with him and was really struck by the way he articulated things. And I realized that he wasn't a Buddhist, but I thought, well, he seems to really be the embodiment of everything that I've been studying. This was an awakened person, and I don't think I'd really met one, given that I'd met some Buddhist teachers. I never met someone of the quality of Jean Klein. So it was the quality of his being, his presence, that drew me to him. The words weren't familiar necessarily, but the embodiment, the essence of who he was definitely appealing, and I knew that if I wanted to wake up, this was the person to follow. So that was the beginning. It lasted 10 years until he died, 10 years later.
Yeah. So before we move on, why don't you outline for us like the different Buddhist traditions that are out there?
Well, even though I'm the co-author of Buddhism for Dummies, it's hard to outline them all. But there are three, two major streams of Buddhism. One is called Theravada, the way of the elders. The other is called Mahayana, the great vehicle. And the traditional Buddhism of Southeast Asia, originally, of course, in India and then throughout Southeast Asia, is one of rigorous practice toward what is called nirvana, and one goes through four major stages of realization. And it's primarily a monastic tradition. The it's The lay people primarily support it as uh, giving donations and everyday devotional practice, but the real, what's considered the real practice, is done by monks in monasteries. Okay, and the ideal is to get off the wheel of samsara, of suffering, and enter nirvana, which is a state of complete peace and tranquility, and to abide there. Okay. The Mahayana tradition, which passed from India into East Asia, into China, ultimately over into Korea and Japan. I presume you're Vietnamese.
Yes,
And
sir.
Vietnam, of course, interestingly enough, was a place where the two came together. Thailand is primarily Theravada, but of course, the great Zen master Thich Nhat Hanh, who was a Zen teacher, one of the great Buddhist teachers of Vietnam, was a Zen teacher, a Mahayana teacher, interestingly enough. But then so East Asia through China, Korea, Japan, then probably back into Vietnam, or perhaps from China to Vietnam, uh, was about really the primary differences were that the ideal was not to get off the wheel, but the ideal was to become a being called a bodhisattva, whose role was to help free all beings. In other words, you don't get off the wheel, you come back, and you participate in life for the benefit of all beings. The pointer also was to, rather than simply impermanence, is to the emptiness of all phenomena, to realize the emptiness and to wake up to the essential empty nature of phenomena, and also the compassion as being an equal component to wisdom, a real emphasis in the East Asian, in the Mahayana tradition, on compassion, again, for the benefit of all beings, sometimes called bodhicitta, awakened heart. Okay, so those are the main differences. Yeah. And it's not primarily a monastic or only a monastic tradition. It's equally available to lay people, emphasis on lay people, the availability to lay people to wake up, and quite a lot of lay practice. Yeah.
I see. Yeah, I really should look more into the Buddhism of my own country.
Of your own country. Of course, a lot of Vietnamese are Catholics, so that's the other side. But the Buddhism in Vietnam, yeah.
Yes. I happen to be a Catholic. So,
Yeah.
What tradition does John Klein best place himself in?
Well, he's not Buddhist, of course. He studied with a teacher of Advaita Vedanta, non-dual Vedanta. And of course, Vedanta means the teachings of, basically the essential teachings of Hinduism, which are found in the Upanishads, the great texts of Hindu teachings, which teach that what is the most succinct way to put it? The world is an illusion. Brahman alone is real. The God alone is real, and God is the world. The world is essentially divine. The world we see in manifestation is illusory, and the essence of reality is the divine. Okay, consciousness, your true nature. Huh? Which, of course, is very similar to the teachings of Zen, which is a Mahayana tradition, and the non-dual traditions of Tibet, Dzogchen, Mahamudra, also Mahayana Vajrayana, which is the teachings of Tibet, are essentially Mahayana in the broadest perspective. So, and Advaita Vedanta and Mahayana Buddhism had a very close relationship in India in the early centuries of the after Christ, so there was a lot of cross-fertilization, and so Advaita Vedanta, Mahayana Buddhism, very close relationship. A little more emphasis on the empty, illusory nature, but essentially the same teachings. But the way they were taught are different. What really attracted me to Jean Klein was I had spent many years meditating, of course, intensively in order to wake up, right? And Jean said to me and to others, meditate. There's no point in meditating except to discover who you really are. Other than that, meditation is just, a preoccupation, and there's nowhere to go because it's already present and available to you right here, and you can wake up in a heartbeat. If meditation helps you do that, that's great. Otherwise, it can just condition the mind and take you away from your natural state. So he gave a certain caveat around meditation, which I found very refreshing after years and years of meditating and getting essentially nowhere. Having some insight, but feeling frustrated, I would say.
So what does it mean to wake up?
Well, to wake up is to the way I describe it or define it briefly is it's a fundamental shift in the locus of your identity. Okay, so right now you think of who you are as this body mind centered here. I'm inside my brain, probably, looking out and who I really am is in here in this body mind, surrounded by other people and things, and I've got to negotiate that whole realm of outside versus inside, and it's either threatening or providing possible reward, but it's all in terms of me, right? So awakening is a fundamental shift in who you take yourself to be. Instead of taking yourself to be this little person inside your head, inside your body, this body mind that dies when the body mind dies, you realize that there's no separation between inside and outside. There's just beingness, just consciousness, just awareness, or, spirit, whatever we call it. It's not substantial, can't be grasped. It's all pervasive, and it is what is functioning through you. You're a vehicle for being itself to function, an expression of being. You're not the center of the universe. You're just a kind of functionary in the play of reality. Okay, and when you recognize that you are being and not the little someone, it's not like you can ever stop being a little someone. You do have a life. You have your friends and your work and your partner and your whatever, your family, whatever it is. But that's not essentially who you are. You recognize that essentially you are being, and that shift is very significant, life transforming. As you might imagine, what is gazing out through these eyes? Okay, that's the ultimate question. Who am I? What is gazing out through these eyes? Is it the little self inside the head, or is it being, looking through this portal? The Sufis say that God created human beings so that he or she or it can witness itself, can see itself. We are a vehicle for God to see itself. So I think it's a beautiful way to put it. In fact, this morning I was musing on another beautiful definition of God, originally attributed to a Greek philosopher. I really doubt that he said this, since Greek philosophers were not monotheistic, but I think it's more really a Christian, mystical definition of God, which is that God is a circle whose center is everywhere and whose circumference is nowhere. If you take that, if you really follow that to its real unfolding, its denouement, its implications, that will take you all the way to awakening. God is a circle or a sphere, if you take it into the 3 dimensions, whose center is everywhere and whose circumference is nowhere. That's it. Go with that, and it'll take you there.
Yeah, that's a beautiful way to put it.
Yeah.
So what is the role of a spiritual teacher, say yourself or John Klein, in this process of waking up?
You catalyze awakening. Help to catalyze awakening by being present as awakening, awakened presence, non-dual presence, being that from moment to moment. And in the presence of such a person, one then can attune to it, grok it, to really feel it and experience it, and also to offer words that point back to it. That's the fundamental role of a spiritual teacher. A spiritual teacher's role is to make themselves dispensable, unnecessary, right?
And to what extent did John Klein fulfill this role?
I think he did a good job. I feel pretty good. I feel he did his job. He was a real guru for me, and whenever I think of him, I feel deeply moved. He was a true teacher. Yeah.
Yeah. And what makes a good spiritual teacher, i.e., what separates them from, say, the less good ones?
Well, they're more refined and accurate as pointers. They more fully embody the truths that they're teaching, right? And they have less personality and ego to get in the way. I would not say no personality, no ego, because that's very rare to meet someone like that. but they get out of the way for the most part, and this realization, this non-dual presence, radiates through them. The purer a vehicle they are, the better a teacher. Right?
Yeah, I read one of Kleins's books. I believe it was The Ease of Being. So it's I would say my first like introduction to his teaching or the kind of teaching that is dialectical in nature. So there's a question and there's an answer.
I'm
And
sorry, you're referring to the book.
yes,
There's a
yes,
question and answer in the book.
yes,
Yeah, it's a dialogues. They're often
yeah,
dialogues. Yeah.
yes. And it reminds me a lot of I guess the Buddhist slash Confucian teaching that I'm familiar with when I was living back in Vietnam, where there's a question and the teacher answers. And this is where, for the most part, most Buddhist retreats tend to take place too. Like you know, a would-be student asks the monk or the monastic figure.
All the koans, the Zen koans, are dialogues, right?
Yes.
Most of them. Yeah.
So I think that's something that's beautiful about this the Buddhist teaching or the Eastern spiritual teaching that that is
Of
not
course, it's
very,
also true in Western philosophy, right?
course,
Plato, the dialogues of Socrates, right?
of course, yes.
Socratic method, we call it.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yes, but of course, after Plato, I think no philosophers write
Not
dialogues,
so much.
mostly
No.
do treatises. So I think that's beautiful that yeah, the dialectic tradition is kept in yeah, the Eastern world.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, so tell me about how this method of teaching helps, to carry the message across, so to speak.
Yeah, that's a great question. Well, I think as a student gets closer and closer, they're refining their understanding and their questions get more and more precise, right? And so a teacher can use those as guideposts to help the student get all the way. What's getting in the way of your realization? That's ultimately what the questions come down to, because otherwise you have no questions, right? If you're fully realized, you recognize who you are, there are no questions. So the questions are what gets in the way, right? And the teacher can help point to, well, gee, maybe if you saw things a little differently, or you asked the right question, or if you just fine-tuned your understanding just a little bit, then you take the next step. So that's why, it's like honing in. The student can hone in on what gets in the way of their realization, and the teacher can help them take the next step, basically. And that's how it is in the Socratic dialogues. Of course, they're more rational. It's more about the mind rather than direct realization, but I think they function in the same way.
Yes.
What is your own background? Are you trained in some kind of philosophy or
I'm a Catholic, so I guess my philosophical outlook is Catholic at its base. But
practicing Catholic? Of course, there's a whole range of, there's Meister Eckhart
of
and,
course, yes.
Teresa of Avila, and, you got a bunch of great mystics there.
Mhm.
Yeah,
And I should mention too that in the Gospels, the Jesus teaches his disciples, and of course rebukes the Pharisees in the form of the dialectic too. They put questions onto him, and he gives them answers.
absolutely. Jesus is a great spiritual teacher. Yeah.
Right. But when you get to say Paul, then it becomes treatises in the form of epistles.
Ah, okay. Interesting. Yeah, things changed with Paul, huh? So you can take Catholicism wherever you want to go with it. You can go with it wherever, different directions it'll take you. A very rich tradition, yeah.
Of course. Um, so what can we learn from John Klein as a human being?
Well, everything I've said to you is his legacy, right? His teachings. Yeah. I mean, as a human being, he was just an ordinary human being. He loved good food, good wine. He was French, originally from Germany, and loved beautiful music. And he was a violinist. As a person, he was very refined, old European gentleman, I call him. So as a person, lovely person, but as a teacher, as the embodiment of what we're talking about here, That's what he had to offer, right?
So how do you, I guess, synthesize the teachings of John Klein with the other teachers that you've had the fortune of studying under?
Well, it's lived in the realization because they were all pointing to the same place. So I don't try to synthesize the teachings, although it does seem to happen as I teach, because I was trained for 10 years intensively in Zen Buddhism. So I have a real strong foundation in Buddhism, and I would say fundamentally, at the heart of it all, what I teach is Buddhist. It's the essence of Buddhism. But then I also studied Dzogchen, Mahamudra with several teachers. I'm certainly very familiar with Vipassana, and then Advaita with Jean Klein. So when I teach, these different teachings come through, but in everyday life, I'm not synthesizing anything. It's just living it, moment to moment, the essence of it. So it could be a Christian, statement that will remind me, There are constant reminders throughout the day to reflect on, to see from this perspective, like the circles whose center is everywhere.
What animates your love of learning more and more about Buddhism?
Well, it's not. I'm not learning anything. I think it's one of my favorite quotes. Really, the circle is is a beautiful quote. The one there are some real beautiful pointers. One of my favorites is from this Indian teacher, Punjaji. His name is H.W.L. Punja, student of Ramana Maharshi, very popular in the 90s among Westerners. And he said, "I'm in love with the mystery, and I don't know what it is." To me, that also says it all. I'm in love with the mystery, and I don't know what it is. I don't know what it is. I'm fascinated. I'm in love with it. And because of this love of the mystery, I'm endlessly fascinated by life and reality and what truth has to offer moment after moment. So there's an endless curiosity and fascination and love. It comes from love, ultimately. Love is the fundamental activating and guiding principle, as Jesus would say. Right?
Um, this is a more this is a broader question, but what has Buddhism to offer to, say, the Western man?
Oh, and woman.
Of course, the Western
Yeah, yeah.
person. I suppose.
Okay, sorry, just um, Western human being. Well, again, that's a huge question, but I think awakening is basically what we're talking about here. I mean, to put it simply, the way I put it, and by the way, for your readers, listeners, I have a new book coming out. Unfortunately, not until next year. It takes a book over a year to get into print, folks. Called Infinite Awakening, in which I talk about a lot of these things. But the major issue is that most, if not all of us, are lost in a dream. Huh? A dream about who we are and about what reality is. It's a narrative that we carry around with us. It's who we take ourselves to be. It's what we take reality to be. It's how we define everything. It's a filter through which we see everything. And we're trapped in this dream. Okay? We're lost in the dream. And awakening, which is, of course, a metaphor, we talk about awakening. We're awakened from what? Awakened from the dream that we take to be reality. Okay? We take ourselves to be a separate person, cut off from life, with a certain limited characteristics, and limited possibilities, and we have a set of beliefs about life and about ourselves. There's something wrong with me. I'm not good enough. That some version of that is almost all pervasive certainly in the Western world, and we go about life living in this dream, trapped in the dream. Okay. And we may have some, intimations that we're lost in the dream, but we have no idea how to get out of it. And so Buddhist teachings and the teachings that I offer, which are, of course, fundamentally, again, essentially Buddhist, Although my first Zen teacher said, never call yourself a Buddhist, which I've tried to follow his advice. So it's about waking up from the dream, identifying the dream, seeing it for what it is, a set of beliefs, stories, expectations, projections, memories, and recognizing that you are not the dream, that you are out of the dream, essentially, by your very nature. Who you really are already is out of the dream. So the issue is to recognize who you are, that which is free from the dream, and abide there. That frees us from this limitation, this sense of being trapped, and opens us to a whole new realm of possibilities of how to be in the world. Okay? And as we get older, of course, the weight of that narrative, of that dream, gets heavier and heavier. All the beliefs, all the stories, all the negative experiences we've had that weigh us down, and then we get, it gets heavier and heavier, right? There's the possibility that as we get older, we get lighter and lighter, freer and freer. That's what it has to offer. Yeah.
Yes. You've proposed not calling yourself a Buddhist in your self-description. So is there an alternative term that is more fitting?
What I say if I define myself is I'm a teacher in the non-dual wisdom tradition of Zen and Advaita Vedanta. Zen, Dzogchen, and Advaita Vedanta. That's how I define it. That's a non-dual wisdom tradition that's as close as I can get.
I've heard that in the earliest days of Christianity, the followers of Christ do not call themselves Christians. They call themselves roughly something like translated to followers of the way, basically, because
Beautiful.
Jesus says, "I am the
Exactly.
way, the truth, and the life."
And there is, of course, some controversial and perhaps dubious evidence that Jesus studied in India for a period of time.
Yes, yes. I believe Deepak Chopra wrote a book about it. So,
Oh, did he?
yes.
Okay. Well, it was originally put forward, as I recall, by let's see, the author of Autobiography of a Yogi, Vivekananda. No, it wasn't Vivekananda. Anyway, one of those Indian philosophers who came to the West. He was the one who originally said it. He said there were evidence in Tibetan texts, and no one has ever really followed it to its. I didn't know Deepak had done that, but interesting. It said that.
Yes, I don't remember the book outright, but yeah, he alleges that Jesus has the years between the age of 12 and 30 were called the hidden years in Christian.
Okay. Yes, so he follows that.
And Chopra, I believe, drawing from previous texts, believes that
Well, I think one way to put it is who knows, but they obviously come from the same source, and that source is universally available and has been refracted through different cultures and traditions as different teachings. If we see the different religious and spiritual traditions in that light, then there's just one source, and they're all pointing back to that one source in their different ways.
Yes. What surprised me when I learned about the Buddhist and Hindu traditions is that they seem to believe in this well, I cannot say monotheistic, but I would say all-encompassing God. Because when I was a kid, I always thought that Buddhism is there's no God in Buddhism. It's the Buddha, and you follow his example. And in Hinduism, there are just thousands of gods. So tell me more about how you describe God.
Oh, I think God is a circle whose center is everywhere and the circumference is nowhere. Says it. I don't use the word God primarily, but I've had little awakenings where I could see everything as God, and I think if the word God resonates for you, then God is great, a way to describe it. But I don't usually think in terms of God. I think in terms of beingness, consciousness, what is, the isness, just this, reality in its entirety, as a living presence. These might be different ways of talking about it. I don't think so much about God as such, but it is interesting that in the Buddhist tradition, particularly the Mahayana tradition, there were two primary currents. One of them was anyway, the words are not important, but Madhyamika, the other was the Yogacara. One of them said that everything is empty. You cannot grasp anything. It's ungraspable. As soon as you start to assert one, the nature of reality, you constellate the other. You can't say anything without also talking about its opposite. There's no way to grasp, okay? And so there's nothing there to grasp. There's no essence. It's all just empty, okay? Then the other tradition said there is an essence. It's called the mind-only school. There's only consciousness. This is more similar, you could say, to Advaita Vedanta. Although, you could say Advaita goes either way. So it's either all God or it's empty. There's no in between, or it can be both. In Zen, both are embodied in the Zen tradition. Both are embodied in Tibetan tradition. There's God, there's only God, and it's empty of all substantiality. Okay, so that would be God. Hindu tradition, again, in its essence, it would say there's only, Brahman, only God. In its manifestation, multiple gods, but in its essence, just Brahman, the Godhead. Again, like there's the Trinity in Catholicism, but the essence. What is the essence of it all? There's just one essence. There's three aspects of God, but one essence, what we could say. So there are different aspects, but Father, Son, and Holy Ghost. But what is it? What's the essence of all of that? Right?
So what is non-dualism?
Well, non-dualism, there are a number of different ways you could look at non-dualism, but primarily the one that I teach is that inside and outside, subject and object, self and other are not two. That's where the word non-dual comes from. Advaita means not two. Doesn't mean one, means not two. So non-dualism, not two. There are not two. There's just, but again, you wouldn't say the one. There are not two. There's no separation. It's one interpenetrating. I think Thich Nhat Hanh's word actually expression is a beautiful way to put it, which is interbeing. Everything inter is, right? Everything is interconnected, and entwined, and not separate. Okay, that non-separation is what non-dualism means. So that which is gazing out, and that which is gazed upon, are not separate. What's looking out through these eyes, what's looked at, are one essence. Consciousness, awareness. Okay, that's what non-dualism means primarily, and so that is something that can be known directly, experienced in an ongoing way, and lived from. Right? One can recognize that I'm not in charge here. Life is living through this body-mind. Who I take myself to be is just a vehicle for that which is. Right, and that which is aware, dynamic. And empty, fundamentally. Mm-hmm. Gazing with sheer awareness into sheer awareness. That's the way it's put in the Tibetan tradition.
Before moving on, I'd like to relate this small personal story of mine. So I'm sure you have the same experience, but when I was a kid during family reunions, the kids and the adults are separated. There's a kids table and there's the adults table. And I always try to want to go to the adults table and they would never let me in. And I think one of the things that made me a Christian is that story in the gospel where Jesus encounters a kid and the disciples did not want the child to enter the circle, and Jesus lets him in, and he says, well, unless you be like children, you may not enter the kingdom of God. So
Uh,
I guess one of the things that interests me and makes me a Christian is, well, that's the religion where kids can be it in the adults table.
and what do you suppose that Jesus really means? Aside, there's the concrete story, but what does Jesus mean when he says you must be like children in order to enter the kingdom of God?
Um, my reading has always been that I think children are, for the most part, unencumbered by the world, the I guess his image of himself as a subject. There's another story in the gospel where
So
Jesus.
say that again. So children are not encumbered by an image of themselves as a subject.
Yes, and of course, their role in the world, so to speak. There's another.
Okay, beautiful. So they don't identify with a separate self.
Yes, there's another gospel story where Jesus instructs someone who wishes to follow him to sell all his possessions, and he goes away very sad because he could not do that. Well, children do not have possessions, so that is he would follow Jesus in a heartbeat.
Yeah, again, and that's the what I mean by the burden of all of our beliefs and stories. Yeah, we're not carrying around. A child is not carrying around this burden. Doesn't live in this narrative. The ideal child as we might envision it.
Of course. Yeah, I think in the modern world we often have this concept that children needs teachers, but in many ways they can be teachers too.
Absolutely.
Yes. So tell me more about the Buddhist tradition when it comes to children.
To children, I don't know much about the Buddhist tradition when it comes to children. I don't know if there's a particular philosophy about children, but just what I was saying, that they don't have the accumulated encumbrance of all the beliefs and stories, certainly. Yeah.
I see. So that mean that they can more easily wake up from the collective dream, so to speak.
Could be, but of course, children don't have the maturity to see in that way. But, it could be that if you don't overly condition a child, they can be more available as they get older to awakening teachings. Are children born awake? I mean, that's the teachings of, let's say, Advaita is that, or these traditions in general, are that is our essential nature. Our natural state is openness, okay? Unencumbered, clear seeing, non-dual presence. This is our natural state, something we're born with. And a child, of course, experiences that quite a bit. Being in nature, playing with, an animal or a plant, or, just there's no separation. Of course, they may not recognize that there's no separation, so there's another level of recognition, but children are more available,
Mhm.
to those insights, huh?
How can we, or so the modern concept of man, at least in the Western world, is that man is an individual. You're a collection of thoughts and emotions and experience that are separate from, say, the other person. So,
And of course, to some degree, that is true,
yes.
no matter which perspective you see it from.
Mhm. So how can we recognize or reconcile that concept with the idea that, every man is a manifestation of being and that hence, share a common,
Every person,
yes, person, of
okay,
course. Yes,
yeah,
I'm using man
I,
as person.
I know, but in this world today, I think it's really important that we include
Of
women.
course.
So ask me the question again, please. As soon
Okay.
as I heard the word man, I just,
Okay. So every person,
yeah.
how can we reconcile the idea that every person is an individual with, her own thoughts, emotions, and experiences with the idea that all.
It's a great paradox, and it's a mystery. I think it's one of the great mysteries, that we are consciousness itself, being itself, and at the same time, we are this individual person. And of course, it's paradoxical, but not contradictory. We live as people, as individuals in the world, and we have our own particular likes and dislikes, our own particular inclinations and talents, particular forms of suffering, so we're each very different. So, the metaphor probably that's most apt is that, who we really are is light, and each of us is a particular refraction pattern of the light, of the essential white light, pure light that we are fundamentally. Okay, so in manifestation through these bodies and minds, it comes out in certain ways. Sometimes much to our chagrin. Oh, I didn't really mean to say that, or gee, I'm really limited in certain ways. But it just comes, because of the body mind and the brain and all of that. The pure light of consciousness, of beingness, comes through us in a unique pattern, like a cookie cutter. You ever, when you were a kid, you put all the dough into this bag and you squirts out the cookies. Each one has a different pattern, right? So we're the dough. We are essentially the dough, and it gets refracted into different cookies, right? So just the way it is. So who we are fundamentally is light, is love, is consciousness, and each of us is a particular refractor of that light. It's just the way it is. So I think we need to keep recognizing that we are fundamentally this light, and at the same time be aware of and acknowledge and embody, the way we express ourselves. So, I think both are true. I think it's a paradox in some ways, because of course, if we don't identify with a person, then it's just functioning. But to a certain degree, we always identify with it, right? And that's freedom. Awakening is to not identify with the manifestation, to know ourselves always as the essence, at the same time taking responsibility for and living. So how do someone do that? That's, to me, it's paradoxical. It's a great mystery. I think it's something we're constantly discovering. The philosopher, the teacher, spiritual teacher, Hamid Ali, talks about being a point of light. Of course, you are light. We are light, but we're also a point of light, right? And when we're manifesting as light, we are a particular point of light. Each one of us is a particular point of light at the same time that we are light. See? So that's one way of talking about it. Okay.
Yes. I think it's beautiful that this path to enlightenment or awakening can be found not just in the Buddhist tradition, but the traditions of all major religious and spiritual practices across time and space.
Beautiful. I totally agree. Yeah.
Yes. So, what makes this? I guess. Why is this so to speak?
I have no idea. The why question, I have no idea. Again, I'm in love with the mystery and I don't know what it is.
Yes. Yes. So do I. What is the self?
Well, there is no self. The self is a collection of thoughts, feelings, beliefs, stories, memories, etc., emotions, feelings. A collection. That's all. Constantly shifting and changing. You could say there are multiple selves, which is also something that one can experience directly. When we say there's a part of me that wants to do this and a part of me that wants to do that, those are different selves,
Mhm. Yes, it reminds me of one of my favorite poems, "Song of Myself," Walt Whitman. I believe
Beautiful, great
he.
enlightened, being he was.
Mhm.
Amazing poem.
Yes, I believe there's a line there that says, "Well,
Do I
do
contradict myself? Very well then, I contradict
contradict
myself.
myself. I
I am
am
large,
large.
I
I
contain
contain
multitude.
multitudes."
Yeah, you got it. Yeah.
And I guess so. Should we conceive of ourselves as such, the way that Walt Whitman sees himself, or
Well, again, sure. Why not? If you can conceive of yourself in any way, that's probably a good way to do it, yeah, I would say. But be the largeness, fundamentally, yeah, the
Um,
vastness.
so, to what extent can, say, our five senses help with the process of breaking away from the self-illusion?
Very good question. The five senses are a way, if we can sense reality, come out of our head into direct sensation, it takes us into a more direct experience of reality as it is. Huh? Of course, it's being filtered through our limited five senses, but it's a first step towards disidentifying from the mind, the contents of the mind. Huh? And it becomes a portal. The sensate experience becomes a portal, actually, beyond sensation into consciousness. It's a, you could say, a intermediary between the mind, the conceptual mind, and pure consciousness, because one can then let the sensate experience dissolve into awareness much more readily than the ideas do. Yeah.
And in many of Sam Harris's meditation sessions, he tells the listener, the meditator, to look for what's looking. What do you
Right.
think that means?
Everything that I've been talking about, to find out what is aware, because what is aware is consciousness, okay? Not the mind as such. The mind is just contents, okay? Just a bunch of ideas and stories. What is aware of that? To keep returning back to that which is aware, which is prior to thought, prior to sensation. He's guiding you back to take the backward step, to recognize the awareness which is prior to, behind all content, the context behind all content. That is what you fundamentally are, as I've been talking about. So it's a pointer, and this is what the teacher does. Offers pointers. Embodies realization, and offers words that point. Huh?
Yes. In Klein's book, yes, being the ease of being. One of the students asked him, "Well, how can we remember your teachings?" And he says, "Well, you don't need to. Once you practice what he suggests, then it's
Once you
easy."
realize it, you don't need to remember. Yeah.
Yeah. And it comes as a full-blown revelation for me because you know, in Vietnamese grade school system, you are told to memorize a lot of things, and once the exam is finished, you don't remember these things anymore.
Yeah. Same in the US too. Probably not as much, perhaps, but yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yes,
Exactly. So it's not about the content.
of course.
Yeah.
And it's I think it's profound in a way that our bodies, our five senses can in some ways do the remembering for us.
Uh-huh. Yeah. I
Yes.
agree.
And so that brings me back to, of course, John Klein. When you remember him, what is the first memory that comes up?
Presence. The quality of his presence. He really embodied it. For me, the teachings came not in the words. So of course, the words were powerful, but in the silence. And at retreats, I would often go into the meditation hall, the sitting hall, the yoga hall, and beforehand, and if he was there, I'd just sit with him in the silence. I felt the transmission was very powerful in the silence. So it's the silent presence that I remember most of all. Yeah.
That's beautiful. Tell me more about the value of silence in this practice.
Well, you are silence. Who you fundamentally are is the silent presence. So silence is an ongoing invitation to return to who you really are. You know, everything arises out of silence, returns to silence. Silence is the clearest expression of being, I would say.
Okay. So finally, John Klein also has a book called Be Who You Are, which I hope to read at some point. So
Be who you are, really.
yes, I think it's one of the final book that he published, but
Really?
published
Okay.
like posthumously. I think it
You
was
sure that isn't a
May.
book by Ramana Maharshi?
It could be, but yeah, I come across
Okay.
this title, but yeah, it's
The
called.
book I recommend most of, which I think is the clearest, probably the best edited, is I Am.
Mhm.
Also, Transmission of the Flame is very good. They're all beautiful. Who Am I, of course. But I Am, I found the most powerful, the most succinct.
Yes. So since we are, in some ways rebuking this conception of, being identified with the mind, so in some ways, how do you practice, uh, who you are, so to speak?
Well, the way I teach people is, first of all, to recognize who you are. Have a direct, again, it's this awakening, a direct recognition of who you are beyond the mind, and as awareness itself. Once you recognize that, you have a clear recognition, keep returning to it. So I say throughout the day, stop every now and then, remember, remember, where am I, who am I? Recognize, return, and rest. Recognize this awareness, which is free of all identification. Return there and rest as that for a few moments, and then go about your day. Keep returning. It gets stronger and stronger. Your knowing, your identification with this, your true being, gets stronger and stronger, more and more available to you. If there's a
So,
practice, that's the practice. Yeah.
so finally, at the beginning, I introduced you as a spiritual teacher and a counselor, which, of course, I'm knowing that it doesn't encompass, your whole
Right.
being.
Right.
But when the question is posed, who are you? How would you answer?
Well, everything that I've been talking about and nothing, huh? I am the awareness prior to all experience. I am that which is fundamentally, right? I'm not separate from reality itself. I'm being itself. I am consciousness. At the same time, I'm this guy going through life, in his, kind of very imperfect way. So, all of that.
Okay. I think that's a wonderful way to end on. Thank you very much, Stephen Bodian.
Yeah, my pleasure, Sean. So lovely to be with you.
Lovely to be with you as well.
Yeah, great. Okay.